Hello and welcome to Expand Realty. I'm here with Randy Hitada, the real estate expert, been in this business 20 years, on the board of directors for LVR, board of directors for the state of Nevada. You have been following the NAR settlement, the big NAR settlement. We're going to break it down today. Tell us what in the world is the NAR settlement?
Well, let me reverse and talk about you for a little bit, Bill. So you're a blast from the past. I don't know if we can talk about it, but we've been on TV together. In fact, you're the one who brought me on the air and started this madness up, right?
That's right.
And our whole thing was trying to bring value to that world. But at that time, we also had to sell homes, so we talked about that. But as you know, we continue trying to add value and educate the world, right?
Yes, definitely.
Well, Bill Gaylord, it's from what, Gaylord Hansen Group, is it?
Gaylord Hansen team.
He's a very versed mortgage lender, been in the industry from a very long time, originally from what?
30 plus years now, Randy.
30 plus years?
30 plus years.
You got me by 10, brother.
I know. There's a lot of wisdom up here now.
That's respectable, man. I will tell you, it's the best word I could come up with.
Respectable.
No, but in all honesty, you are one of the most knowledgeable guys out there, and it really is refreshing to get back together. It's been a while that we've crossed paths, and I see you online though. I see your presence.
I see you online doing your thing because you're always educating. You're one of the leading experts in Las Vegas with real estate, always keeping up with the trends, always trying to promote real estate and what's going on. So this topic, because a lot of people have no idea what NAR is, National Association of Realtors. And then there's settlement of what in the world is a settlement?
God, you know what? This is like...
You've been dealing with this for a long time, haven't you?
It's been 4 years on the state and local LVR board that we've been dealing with the Department of Justice and multiple issues that I can't talk about. But what I can talk about is where we are today, right?
You were involved in all that.
So the 4 prior years, 2023 and back, I've been, on the board with our association trying to protect our industry. Now we're here, 2024. Took a step back, but still trying to provide value to our industry and to the world, for that matter.
Yeah.
And more to come, right? More to come. But today's the taboo subject that we've been trying to avoid for a very long time. Talking too much about, because no one likes talking about it, except you guys probably want to hear. And so we're doing this by special request and piggybacking off our last market update podcast. I promised I would do it, so here we are. And I'm sure Bill is going to put me on the spot, and will I him.
I got some good questions for you, Randy, because this topic, people don't really know what it is. They've seen that the settlement has been hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's like, why? Why did this happen? What is the NAR settlement, and why did it occur? You
know why there's confusion?
Yeah.
It's because, this is my opinion.
Well, I don't know, but you tell me.
Well, this is my opinion because I've watched the news before, and I'm not knocking the news, but I do know what sells on the news, and it's usually gloom and doom.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, the sky's falling is what sells, and that's what they tell the people because that's what people watch.
Right.
And it's very skewed. And so what I would like to dig in today is really from a very high level and easy to understand perspective. What is this settlement about? How does it affect our industry? How does it affect you guys as a realtor, buyer, seller, or even mortgage lender, financing person? What do you call yourself?
Originator.
Originator?
Yeah, it's a very technical term.
Well,
Loan officer is another term.
You're certainly original.
The original originator.
Hope you're getting all of this. This is good stuff right here. Anyways, we have another blast from the past joining us. He's behind the scenes, Robert Condal. I probably butchered his last name.
No, that was perfect.
That's right. Is right?
Perfect, yep.
Yeah, so we've worked together. We've done a lot of things on TV, and they're the one who brought me to the screen, so I really respect and enjoy working with them.
Good. Well, I'm
you
excited.
Guys.
So what can you tell us, Randy, about the NAR settlement, and what is it? What do the consumers need to know about it, and how is it going to change the industry? But let's start with what.
The what? Well, what would you like to know? The good, the bad, or the ugly?
All of the above.
All three?
All three. Yeah.
Well, there is good about it, So The long story short is that this whole settlement started with the Department of Justice investigating realtors on price fixing for commissions. This is where this all derived from, and it goes back and back in history on what price fixing is and the history behind price fixing. We don't need to get into that boring stuff. But how it affects our industry is what's important, and that's what I'm here to share from my side, and I'm sure you have your opinion and share.
From the price fixing standpoint, is it were they basically saying that all realtors have agreed that it's going to be either 5% or 6% sales commission, and it goes both sides? What does the price fixing mean?
Simplest way to format that is there was a few brokerages who said it's this price, this commission amount, X amount of apples or nothing. And the consumers really didn't have much of a choice. And X amount of apples are going to the listing agent, X amount of apples are going to the buyer's agent for a total commission. Mm-hmm. Well, the whole beef about it is that consumers, sellers, and even buyers should have a choice, and they should be able to negotiate that. And thus, when you have multiple brokerages that say it's X amount, could be looked at as price fixing, and that's where that mm-hmm. rabbit hole started. Mm-hmm. But along the way, my opinion, and I was going to say don't record this, but too late now.
Too late now.
I believe it became a money grab, and I believe that attorneys got wind of the actual legal actions that were happening and found a opportunity in there, and it became somewhat of a class action suit where from a specific case, someone went after a specific brokerage, and it expanded to a national lawsuit. And obviously, they came to, this ended in a settlement that's going to happen. Let's get to the when.
When is it all happening?
Oh, yeah, you did ask me. August 17th.
August 17th. That's not just right around the corner.
Well, they've delayed it a few times. It's supposed to settle in August 17th, and we're supposed to, as an industry, comply to those rules August 17th. But the money grab. Let's talk about the money grab.
I agree. There's so much going on there, and my question to you is, how do you know the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars that we're talking about in this settlement?
$418 million settlement
with the NAR.
NAR has to pay that in 4 years.
$418 million in the
4 years.
So my question is, let's say someone out there, and it happened in one case and then expanded nationally. Who, like, it's always a money grab from the attorney standpoint. Let's be honest. Right?
I have attorney friends out there, right? So, I'm not hating, but I am.
But who can actually claim that? How much does actually get paid out to supposedly the people who are injured by it? How much goes to the attorneys? Because that's $418 million. That's a lot.
It's a lot of money, and obviously it's being divvied up. A portion, I don't know the exact amount, but, whatever fee the attorneys are charging, and it's a pretty hefty fee, hefty. Mm-hmm. And the balance is getting spread out between the consumers and whoever signs up on a specific website, which I'm not going to put out there right now, can get potentially included into that settlement.
So it becomes class action and I would say that it could potentially become a little bit of a money grab for people who just say, hey, here's free money. I might be able to go sign up for this and get some kind of a check.
It's a money grab for people who may or may not be hurt in getting involved. And second of all, are legal professionals that are getting paid for all of this. That's what it's all about, right? But what I would like to talk about as far as the money grab is the intent for it and the consequences from it, right? And to me, I call it a money grab because this was more than the pursuit of justice, in my opinion, because I'm going to share why. It was the pursuit of money in multiple ways. And what may sound like a good idea, I don't know how well it's been thought through, but there are ill consequences that will come out of this. There's also going to be good consequences. This is not all gloom and doom, but I'm just going to tell it like it is. And people are going to get hurt out of this
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and it's unintentionally hurting the people who need the help the most, in my opinion. That is why I have an issue and I have passion about this topic, because there's going to be a lot of people who may not become or be able to become homeowners anymore based on a new potential system.
So who is it going to hurt the most?
Well, first of all, let's talk about, if you don't mind, how this derived into the settlement it is now from the price fixing thing.
Right.
So the theory behind the settlement today in the lawsuit was that a seller should not have to pay for buyer representation. That's what it comes down to. If you don't have to read through all these words, because that's the summary. The seller should not have to pay for buyer representation.
Or
period.
They should have a choice to pay for it, or they should not.
Well, it started with they should not, but in the end, they should have a choice. And the seller should have a choice to pay a buyer agent. The buyer should have a choice to negotiate commissions. And everyone should have the choice to negotiate commission, from the seller to the buyer to the realtor. Mm-hmm. I guess financing professionals just get to keep theirs, but everyone else has to negotiate. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
We make it all come together.
Yeah. We make it fun too. We made it, right? I hope you're enjoying yourself, but we're making the best out of a not so happy topic.
Yep.
So that's what it's all about. And now, what was your question?
Well, the question is, who's it going to hurt the most? Like, is it going to hurt the high-end buyer, the midterm move-up buyer, first-time home buyers? Who's it going to impact the most?
Well,
and why?
Well, let's talk about the why so we can talk about who it's going to impact.
Okay.
And what's going to happen is that sellers are going to have, which they always had, by the way, more of an option whether to pay a buyer agent a commission or not. So if they don't pay it, then that means the buyer has to pay their buyer agent the commission versus the seller,
right,
if they want buyer representation. And buyers, it doesn't matter if you use me or someone else, get your buyer representation. I mean, that is not even a question. There's just too much that I've seen from a board level for the association here in Nevada and Las Vegas, as a broker, as a practitioner, even from a consumer standpoint. There's just so much for us to know that I can't imagine someone that's not getting paid to know it professionally would know it. Kind of like, maybe you can go to small claims court and do your own case, but I wouldn't go anywhere further than that. And that's for, what is it, 12 grand cap? We're talking about 400, 500, 600 million plus dollars for a home purchase. Protect yourselves, guys. No matter who you use, pick a good one, by the way, but protect yourselves, buyers. So buyers will have the option, if the seller doesn't pay it, to hire and pay their representative a certain commission. And we'll get into the rules of the settlement. But what the consequence is that there's a lot of buyers in there who still can, but it's going to be more challenging to be competitive, that have to pay their buyer agent but may not have the funds to spread out to do so. Yeah. Nor can it potentially be financed in the traditional way, and there's ways around that, which maybe I'll ask Bill about. But the point is that because it comes out of pocket like a closing cost, just like a down payment and closing cost comes out of pocket, if a buyer has to pay their buyer agent, most likely it's coming out of pocket, and depending on what amount of apples is negotiated, that's how much they have to pay on top of their closing costs and down payment. And most first-time home buyers, a lot of VA buyers, veterans, may not be equipped or have the flexibility to have that on hand. Thus, it makes it more expensive for them to buy a house out of pocket.
Yeah. So can I give an example?
Yes.
So let's say somebody is buying a $400,000 house. I guess prior to the NAR settlement, the agents would put on the MLS, the sales commission is going to be a total of, can I just use the number, 6%. And 3% goes to the sellers, 3% paid by the seller, and then the other 3% is paid to the buyer's agent, right?
That's what we've seen a lot in the past.
So that was in the past. Now, so 3% of 400,000 is $12,000. So now what they're saying is the seller's saying, no, I don't necessarily have to pay the buyer's commission. I'm only going to pay the listing agent commission of 3%. And so what they're saying is the buyer now needs to come up with $12,000 in that particular circumstance as additional closing costs. And I work with buyers all day long. And one of the biggest struggles, Randy, is they just don't have enough money for the down payment, the closing costs. And if this is an added cost to them, it's going to be really difficult for some of them.
So this is all done to protect the consumer, which is, in this case, the seller. However, what about the buyer? Because now the buyers who really need the help are the people who are going to hurt the most. They're going to have the most negative consequence, more than anyone else. And you asked me who is going to opt in, who is this going to affect, different price points. So for sure, our first-time home buyers, such as FHA loans and whatnot, where they have government assistance, are going to be affected, no doubt. And you see the numbers on averages. Veterans, same thing, where they have a huge benefit with no money down, now have an expense that maybe they didn't have yesterday. And again, this isn't black and white, because guys, you can still negotiate, or your buyer's agent can still look for listings, one, that pay a buyer's agent commission, two, commissions can still be negotiated into the deal. So it's not the end and black and white, no commission to the buyer agent. It's all negotiable. It's just going to be more challenging because now they have to compete and ask for more, where an equal buyer may not have to ask for that additional commission out of the sale. So these are the people who are going to hurt the most. In my opinion, and this is maybe a little bit of stereotyping, how can I put this in the most PC way? A lot of high wealth people have a lot to protect, and I believe they're going to see the value in protecting their assets by using a professional, whether they have to pay for it or not. They understand that they have to protect themselves. They have a lot to protect. However, most of our buyers fall right in the middle, right? Middle income America, which, we normally cater to. These are the consumers, a lot of you guys watching, that I am really concerned about, because whatever the percent is, if the buyer has to pay it, I understand it's a lot of money. And, to me, Bill Gates said it the best. No, Warren Buffett, price is what you pay, value is what you get. So the good thing is that you're going to be now, if you have to pay and you understand the value in good buyer representation, you're going to shop for the best realtor you can find. So the good realtors are going to do well, because, people won't settle as much. But my concern for you guys out there is that, hey, honey, hey, mom, hey, brother, that's a lot of commission for me to pay. Maybe we can navigate this on our own. And the consequence to that shortcut can be devastating, because once you call me after the transaction is done, or you call your attorney, it is pretty much too late, and you're going to end up in a potential mediation or lawsuit to get justice done, should you be taken in some sort of way, because there's so much, again, that you have to know as a polished professional, that how can someone who doesn't do this full time know all the things that they don't know?
It's complicated.
Right?
There's
you don't know what you don't know.
On the backside to get a transaction done. And so
I've been
dotting
doing
the
this
I's and crossing the T's, it changes too, right?
I've been doing
It's
this as a
another change.
broker and a practitioner for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I learn something almost daily still, right? I'm always learning, growing, and there's so much to learn. And had I been just a consumer not in my industry, maybe I would feel confident that I know a lot, but it's the things you don't know that come back around that could be very harmful, right?
A home inspection. I mean, there's a lot of things that go along
Too much.
with it.
There's too much.
So what if a buyer decides to go direct to the listing agent and they say, I'm going to cut out the buyer broker? What you're saying is having buyer representation is absolutely critical because that way they can protect themselves. A listing agent, dual agency. Let's talk about dual agency.
Well, before we go there, let me hit you with that. Let me at least give you a response. That buyer agent with no representation is going to go head to head with a professional, number one, starting from negotiations and protecting themselves from mainly liability throughout that entire transaction, from contingencies, escape clauses to like you said, repair negotiations, all in the middle of a transaction, which is normal standard procedure. That's just the basics. And, if you don't know how to protect yourself, how do you protect yourself? That's why we hire attorneys. In real estate, we hire realtors, most of the time anyway. And I think, again, the biggest common misconception is not getting value from maybe a realtor or professional they've used in the past. Mm-hmm. And so just to give you an example, because I've taught this through so many times, if you come to Vegas, you gambled, right? And if you gamble, you're going to get a free hotel room. But are you really getting it free? Anyways, I'm sidetracking. The point is you're going to get a free hotel room. And in that nice free hotel room, if they forget the water, no big deal. You tell them, hey, you forgot the water. Or, hey, you forgot to turn the sheets. Or, hey, we're short towels. No big deal. But when you're paying top dollar for the hotel room and they forgot your sheets, something's going to hit the fan, right? You're going to be pretty upset with your experience. And so I think it's going to be the same thing with realtors where, because the buyers necessarily didn't pay for representation in the past, I think a lot of buyers have settled for mediocre services. And I don't think people will settle no more. So the good thing that's going to come out of the lawsuit is that I think buyers are going to shop, screen, do their diligence to pick a good realtor and get the best representation for their dollar. They're not going to settle for the dirty sheets anymore.
So dual agency, what is dual agency? What do the consumers need to know about dual agency?
Dual agency first of all, agency means that I have a responsibility to represent someone, to protect someone. I'm working in their best interest. Dual agency is that professional is now working in two people's best interest. And it's very, very sticky because it's very hard to have a fiduciary responsibility to two people, equally represent two people, equally negotiate on behalf of two people. And by the way, all those, hey, here's my bottom line, or as a buyer, here's my top line I'm willing to pay, has to be disclosed to the other party if you're in a dual agency situation, because it's full disclosure.
Yeah.
Because you have a fiduciary to both parties. And so it's a very sticky situation that we normally would avoid. And there's exceptions I make as a broker. If you're a very sophisticated, for example, investor, and things are pre-negotiated as far as price, terms, maybe as is agreement, then it becomes more transaction management. But on a normal traditional purchase, I've never been through a traditional purchase without negotiations, either on price, terms, repairs, timing, concessions, you name it, extensions that didn't require someone favoring their own representation party, right? Mm-hmm. Or their representation protecting them. It's kind of like, I hate bringing attorneys back in, but having an attorney represent both parties in a lawsuit, it just doesn't work very well. How is that going to work, right?
That's a good point. Renee. Well, you were this and you were this, and let's come together.
It's called mediation.
It's called mediation, arbitration, that kind of thing.
That's what the judges do, right?
Yeah.
Not the attorneys.
That's right. So that's hard. That's hard to do, and that's where sometimes I think, originally the seller has hired a listing agent to represent them, and they've agreed
work in
to
their
a
best
potential
interest.
and work on their best interest. And then all of a sudden, a buyer comes in and says, I want to buy it. Can you be my agent too? And that agent has to walk that fine line because they're representing the seller first, because that, in my opinion, that's where it all started, right? To get the listing. And now this new buyer comes in. So it's trying to connect those two. And I agree with you. I think that's a really good point, that some situations it's okay for an investor, a qualified investor who has done this many, many times, and they can do that. But for a first-time home buyer, man, that's hard to do.
I got to give another example before we move on with lack of representation for a buyer. It's kind of like, no pun to car salesmen, because there's a need for it, but how do you feel as a consumer walking on a car lot? I feel uncomfortable. I feel like I'm going to get taken advantage of. And it's just, whether that's true or not, that's how I'm feeling. Like, I'm feeling a little intimidated that I'm going to be pressured into something I might regret later. I'm not sure if I'm getting the best deal. It's because when I walk on a car lot, I don't have someone protecting my best interest. Right. And then I'm head-to-head with some professional that has all the knowledge. Yeah. And so it's an uncomfortable situation.
That is the worst thing that I could ever get into, is buying a car. I went and bought a car with my wife, and she kicked me out because I just couldn't negotiate. I'm just terrible.
My wife negotiates so much better than I do.
I can't do it. But if you're not a good
cars.
negotiator, right, and you don't understand what the value is and what maybe you can get in terms of repairs on the house that need to be done, you are working with one arm behind your back. So having someone that's representing you, right, the buyer individually, that to me is going to be the best way to make sure that you're covered in the right way.
Just to clear myself here, I'm just going to say this is not a jab at car salesmen. I'm saying you guys are good, and that's why me as a rookie don't feel good, because I'm going against a professional. So just to clarify that, you guys, this is not, dissing any industry. It's just an example of what we're walking into right now, except it's a bigger dollar amount. Huge, we're talking about.
So let's say somebody comes to you and you're a buyer, and you find a good buyer's agent. You're very happy with them, and the buyer has agreed to pay a certain amount to the buyer's agent. The buyer now, what if they go to a house or a listing and they ask, what are you paying to the buyer's agent? Can they ask that, number one? And then number two, if the seller is not paying it, would that lead to basically redirecting the client over to a different house?
Well, a buyer can ask anything they want as long as it's not conflicting with fair housing. And commissions is a fair question. So let's talk about the rules, the rules to the settlement, because that might clarify a few things. So based on the settlement, then again, that's again happening August 17th, you guys. Mark your calendars if you're buying or selling, or your realtor, lender, whatever it is, because that is the date that things are going to change. And one, maybe we should go talk about the why. I don't think we talked about the why they settled, and then we'll piggyback into this, because I believe in order and what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Okay.
All right, so NAR settled this lawsuit not because they felt they were going to lose. Let's get that clear. Or that's irrelevant. They did not settle for that reason. I don't know if they could afford fighting it all the way through, but they did not settle because theoretically they thought they would lose. They settled for three major reasons, and one is for a release of liability from our MLS, multiple listing services, and brokerages, including realtors like myself. And so by them settling the lawsuit goes away, and no longer does the brokerages, the multiple listing services, and the realtors have to worry about this lawsuit going through and each person individually getting potentially sued. So it's a cloak of protection by settling.
Now, do you as a broker have to contribute to the settlement, or is it all coming from the NAR fees?
NAR is we are not contributing directly to the settlement unless you want to, which is why they're gonna struggle a little. They're gonna get hurt by this, and of course they have insurance and everything else to a certain extent, but they're paying it.
They're paying it.
Yeah. So one, they settled for a release of liability. Two, really, it's what we talked about to protect consumer choices on commissions. Everyone should have a choice, and everyone should be able to negotiate. So for those two reasons, they settled. Now, reason for settlement is that. Now, after it settles, the rules to the game, because you can't play the game without knowing the rules, well, anyway. So one is the release of liability. We just talked about that. The first thing the multiple listing service has to do is remove any form of compensation. So no longer anything on the multiple listing service, which thus syndicates to a lot of websites that you guys search on and know about. Technically, because it feeds off the multiple listing service, you will not see what the percentage, if any, that they're paying potentially or offering the buyer agent. And so there's
nothing in the comments, nothing anywhere.
Nothing in the listing.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean you can't find out as a buyer or buyer agent. So you asked me the question, what can buyers ask? Buyers can ask, what's the buyer agent compensation? You have to be licensed to get that compensation. And by the way, you could get a credit potentially, but long story short is that you can ask what it is, and it's a fair question. In fact, if I represented you, that might be one of the top 3 questions I ask, right? How many offers are on the table? Find out what seller motivations are. Third, are you offering a buyer's compensation? Why? Because it affects the buyer. It affects the buyer's expenses and out-of-pocket expenses. And, we can talk about that later. The other major thing coming out of this thing is that if you're a buyer or a buyer agent, you need to get into a, we call it a BBA, a buyer brokerage agreement. And basically, it's just a document explaining agency, meaning if you were my client, it just says, I just hired Randy Hatada. Here's what the commission amount is going to be. Here's what the services that I expect in contract are, because there's going to be different levels of service with this new change, and then the term of the agreement. So those are the things that's going to be in a buyer brokerage agreement, and it can be called different things, but really what it is an agreement of service, long story short. So the buyer is very clear on what to expect for X amount of money.
Yeah. So if somebody goes in, finds a house, say $400,000, and you've got a buyer broker agreement with the buyer that says you will be paid 3% of the sale price of the home. And you go and you've talked to the listing agent, and the listing agent says we'll only pay 1% from the buyer's fee. But the buyer really wants that house. Do they have the ability to negotiate with you? Do they have to come up with the extra money to pay? Do they have time to pay it? Do you know what's going to happen?
Well, there's multiple answers to the way you asked me that question. It's a tricky one. So, one, you can always negotiate with the seller. Commissions can always be negotiated.
Right.
Theoretically, we already have a contract if you're the buyer and I'm your buyer agent on the amount that you owe me. However, there can be combinations of different amounts. Now, there's a very gray area in the fact that if there's X amount getting offered by the seller, if you can, as a buyer's agent, collect the balance from the buyer. Like, there's a little gray area in that. It's not completely worked out yet. But yeah, there can be combinations of different ways to total the entire commission, not always coming from the buyer. Can the buyer negotiate with the buyer's agent? They can always try, but technically you already have a contract saying this is what you're going to pay me.
So it's case by case. It just kind of depends, but probably not.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? Let's just put it out there. It never hurts to ask, but don't be afraid to get a no if you have a contract in place.
Yeah.
However, there are many situations. Doesn't happen super often, but it happens many situations over time, where I've actually helped the buyer with a portion of my commission to make a deal work for all the reasons that make sense. That's the house of their dreams, and if that's the difference between getting it or not, then I don't want a stalemate. I'm going to chip in and try to make a deal work.
Yeah.
That's how we roll over here. Now, that's very different than, hey, I just want more. Please help me.
Right.
So let's make that clear. But there's many times that we'll help out in many stalemates and all that because, one, it serves the buyer. It's a win-win. We still get paid. And, many times I'll even tell my agents, a lot of times half a deal is better than zero deal at the end of the day.
And from the listing agent or the seller side, it may be the only offer coming in on the table. So they would maybe be more inclined to negotiate and pay the buyer broker more to make the deal happen.
Correct. I mean, there's so many different ways to do the mathematics and so many ways to negotiate and make a deal work. And that's what I'm talking about, adding value. Like, there's more ways than we have time for today to make a deal work. If I start, I'm going to go off on a tangent.
I got another question.
Well, before we finish, the other two rules to the game. Two
rules. Okay.
So I already went over release of liability, no form of compensation on the MLS, written agreement to the buyers, which is a buyer brokerage agreement most likely. The fourth is NAR has to pay $418 million to the consumers and the attorneys. And the fifth is really not a rule, but NAR did not admit to any guilt or wrongdoing at all. So those are the things.
All right. So can I ask you another question?
Please.
I told you I'm going to bring it.
Bring it.
So
I'll tell you if I don't know.
Let's talk about a high-end home. Let's talk about a high-end $3 million home. Commissions there, certainly. For somebody buying, has it been usually 2.5%? Is that a fair statement for just from the seller side?
I'm going to avoid the numbers,
okay.
But I will tell you that a lot of us are used to having a 3% listing agent and a 3% buyer agent commission.
So on the high-end home, that's 6%, right, total. That would be $180,000 for commissions, right?
That's a really high-end home.
It's $3 million times 6.
Okay, I missed that.
So $3 million times 6%, $180,000. Do you think that high-end buyer or the high-end seller is going to say, no, I don't know if the other agent's worth $90,000 to bring me a buyer, or will they say, I think they're worth $90,000? How do you think that high-end property will go? Because my personal opinion is some of those high-end buyers are going to go, gosh, I don't know if they did that much work for that amount.
Well, a lot of high-end buyers are very educated and sophisticated. And so that could be good and bad. Good is that they understand a lot. Bad, they may think they know too much and not know everything. Mm-hmm. Now, there always will be people that will negotiate commissions. There also will be people saying it's worth it.
Right.
With no, I have clients like that right now that I understand your value, Randy. I will offer you the high going rate. You don't even have to ask me. I have a listing like that right now, and it's selling for $1.5 million. Because they see the value. I've worked with them in the past. Mm-hmm. They know what they're going to get. On the flip side, I have a lot of interviews where people are going to negotiate, and I don't blame them for doing that, because if I was a consumer, I would probably do some form of negotiations. However, on the professional side, when you're dealing with luxury, maybe you're dealing with a higher level of experience in a niche market. Based on that, there's a handful of high-end, well-known, experienced luxury professionals out there that a lot of people want that specific representation because of their sphere of influence, because of their brand, because of
California moving here.
All of the above. They want the best. You know, Johnny Cochran, no one probably negotiates his rate. They pay it because they understand the value. Yeah. Plus, they don't want to go to jail. In this case, it's a purchase, but maybe those top listing agents say, this is my price, and I'm not going to flex, because if I do it for you, then I have to do it for the world, and I feel I'm worth this price. If not, I'll take someone else that appreciates me. So there's going to be a lot of people in that luxury world that's going to stand firm. I've already talked to a bunch of them. Will there be flex? I think there'll be a lot more flex in negotiations, though, because there is a little bit more wiggle room. But on the flip side, what a lot of even agents don't understand and know is that there's probably more time and more expenses in a luxury listing or a luxury buyer than there is a traditional one. And I'll give you an example. You take a luxury listing. It is not put it on the MLS, sit back and wait for an offer. It is hard work. And second of all, if you're not doing the open houses yourself and all these extra things and the physical opening of door showings because you're protecting your private, exclusive, expensive property, then you're hiring someone to do it. So it's either time or money you're putting in for every showing, right? And a lot of people don't look at that kind of thing. And that doesn't even talk about the staging of the property, the additional marketing fees, advertising fees, professional photography, videography, tours, 3D. Robert will tell you all about that stuff. But the point is that you should be doing, as a luxury agent, all the bells and whistles in order to sell that property, because that's what it takes.
They're spending money to expose it to the
You're
market.
only looking at a small segment of buyers, whereas a traditional median price point home of $490 or whatever it is, maybe you don't need to do so much work because the bulk of the market is shopping that price point. So you have a lot of consumers, buyers. When you're selling a $5 million property, there's only a small handful of consumers, and you need to get in front of them. And whatever it takes to get in front of them, number one, appeal to them, number two, it's a first date. Put all the makeup on, right? All of the above. That's what it takes to sell a luxury home. Yeah. It's not simple.
So you don't think that'll change much on that high end?
I think there's going to be flex, but not as much as people think. Not in that world.
So come August 17th.
Well, depending on the experience levels of that agent.
So come August 17th, change comes into play. What do you think is going to be the biggest change at that time? How are realtors, consumers going to have to adjust and adapt?
The biggest change is going to be buyer agents. Well, both sides, I guess. Buyer agents will need to they'll have to have the courage and the knowledge to explain why the settlement took place, just like we did, why they're worth what they're worth, value proposition, and why they have to sign that buyer brokerage agreement. Mm-hmm. To me, the listing agents are already doing that. They're already, coming forward with a value proposition. This is how I'm going to sell your house. This is what we're going to sell it for. This is how long it's going to take. This is how much it's going to cost you, right? So it's already happening on the selling side. Now, the additional part, though, is they have to talk about to the seller whether it's a good idea to offer the buyer agent a commission or not. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a good idea because there's a consequence that if it's not offered, The buyer has to pay it, and maybe that buyer doesn't want to buy properties that they have to pay a commission for. Duh, right? That might probably happen.
So do you think that this is a lot of news, doom, gloom, and there may not be as many changes as people actually think will happen?
I think it's going to take a higher level of expertise to be able to articulate all of this changes, because this is a major change. I don't care how long you've been doing it, though. It's still the same communication, but the experience gives professionals the confidence and the ability to articulate what's going on, right? Anybody can read this whole long list of, well, how much pages is that? 10,000 pages, word for verbatim, but understanding it and the consulting piece behind it is where the experience comes in, and that's where they have a competitive advantage to have the experience. Now, what the association is worried about, what the local association is also worried about, what the brokerages are worried about, is that here's a stat: 50% of agents, which there are a couple million in America, have only done one or less than one transaction a year.
Yeah.
One or less. These people are going to struggle because they have no experience dealing with this articulation of communication, negotiations with their own people, let alone other people that they're head to head with in the field. Mm-hmm. So again, when things are not free but paid by someone else, people settle. But when you pay from your hard-earned bucks that, in your pocket, I think they're going to get screened heavier. And when you do 1 to 0 deals a year, it's going to be a harder, no longer just because you're my cousin are you going to get the automatic deal anymore is going to happen.
Right.
I feel that's true.
So you believe that the industry itself will actually be probably reduced, the number of realtors in the industry?
The talk
and
from
the ones that have been excelled over the last 10 years or so, they will actually, do you think, propel forward?
Yes. In one word, yes.
Okay.
They're talking about losing almost 40-50% of realtors in the future. But again, 50% are doing one or less.
Yeah.
So the top professionals are smiling at all of this because it's more opportunity for them. They'll get more interviews and go head-to-head with people who got deals on a silver platter, but maybe didn't deserve it experience-wise.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is all probably going to happen based on my experience of what I've seen in the world and probability.
Less realtors. In my industry, we've lost, over the last 3 years, we went from about 180,000 originators down to about 75,000. So, and part of, a lot of it has to do just with the decline in the number of transactions, but the people that are still left are awesome, right? They're still really good. And so that to me, I think the professionalism that you bring to the industry, understanding your wisdom, always following the trends, that's where you're going to excel long term.
Now, because I'm a broker and I do believe in fairness, I think a lot of newer agents are going to be able to maneuver. Communication is key, and then, digging in, getting the knowledge is equally as important. And again, experience, but experience can be brought on by a team leader, a broker to support them through this whole thing. So I'm not saying, you guys, that a newer agent can't make it through this thing. It's just going to be harder.
But what you're saying, or what I'm hearing you say, is that many of them will go to a team, and the team to have the support to basically get through the whole thing and have the experience of a team to help them get through the transaction.
Yeah, because technically you can't buy experience, right? But you can partner with experience.
Yeah. And someone like you, right? You have a lot of experience at this.
Yeah, and from a broker's level, we do trainings on the BBA. We're going to do more and more. We do role playing, whatever it takes to get the confidence levels up and the right words out, because words are critical when it comes to legal stuff, legal and liability. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, just like anything else in the world. And let me tell you this, I just learned this from baseball. If you spend 18 minutes a day in something that you're passionate about, you're going to be on the top 1 percentile in the world.
18 minutes?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, it applies to sports.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I played baseball. A lot of baseball.
Of course, it applies to sports because if it applied to real estate, then I would be like Dalai Lama because I put a lot of hours in. But anyway, I found that very interesting.
That is interesting. Okay, Randy, last words. What would you say to consumers, agents, what they should expect going forward? And is this the end of the world?
It's not the end of the world. Don't overthink it. Just be smart, think smart. Listen to some of the words we shared because this is across the board. This isn't a me thing. This isn't a Bill thing. You know, it's a neutral thing. We're trying to call it like we see it. So I think this is a good video to put out there. I would say don't skip out on your representation. Negotiate for what you feel the value you're going to get is, right? Only you can determine that. But don't settle because you're paying for it. The second thing is, when I talk about sellers, I'm not just talking about resale, I'm talking about brand new homes. A lot of people forget about that. And get your representation, right? Get your representation. I'm telling you, if you hire the right person, it's worth every dollar.
There's a lot that can be negotiated with new homes.
There's a lot that can go right, and there's a lot that can go wrong, and you're probably dealing with the biggest investment you ever did in your life, whether it's the first, second, third, or fourth one, doesn't matter. It's a lot of money you're dealing with, and to me, you know, protect what you work so hard for.
Yep. Well, Randy, it's always great spending time with you.
Yep.
Appreciate the hour that we've had or however long. And I can't wait till the next time.
Been too long, Bill.
Yeah,
next time we'll talk about something more fun. How about that? Right?
This was fun. I enjoyed this.
We'll fly
stuff,
drones with Robert over to Lake Mead
we'll
or something.
Over drones, yeah. So anyways, thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, you guys. I
Bye,
hope you liked it. I got to put a plug in to press like if you liked it. Subscribe and support us because this is why we're doing it. We're trying to put our message out there. Thanks, you guys.
Bye, everybody.